Darius Johnson, a black entrepreneur from an immigrant family background, arrives at an upscale real estate office in a rural Midwestern town to inquire about purchasing a luxury farmhouse property. Dressed in simple work clothes from his family farm, he faces immediate cold stares, whispers, and subtle dismissals from the agents and other clients who assume he's lost or can't afford it based on his appearance and skin color. I used to think that hard work and a little grit could open any door in this world, especially here in America where folks like my family came chasing that dream from Colombia back in the 80s. My parents scraping by on coffee farms down there before packing up everything for a shot at something better up north. But man, let me tell you about the day everything hit different for me, Darius Johnson, that black entrepreneur with roots tangled in both African heritage and those Latin American rhythms my abuela drilled into me with her stories of resilience over cafecito. It was a crisp fall morning in rural Iowa, the kind where the leaves crunch under your boots and the air smells like fresh harvest, and I pulled up to this upscale real estate office in the heart of town. A sleek building with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing glossy photos of sprawling luxury farmhouses, the type with wraparound porches and acres of prime land that screamed old money and exclusivity. I was there to finally make my move on this dream property I'd been eyeing, a 200-acre spread with modern barns and irrigation tech that could supercharge my family's agribusiness. The one I'd built from the ground up, blending my parents' old-school Colombian farming tricks like companion planting with yucca and beans alongside high-tech drones for crop monitoring. Dressed in my everyday work clothes, a faded flannel shirt still dusted with soil from checking the fields that morning, sturdy jeans and boots caked in Midwestern mud, I stepped out of my beat-up pickup truck, the one with the Colombian flag sticker on the bumper as a quiet nod to where I came from, feeling that familiar buzz of excitement mixed with the weight of what this could mean for us immigrants of color trying to carve out a legacy in a place that doesn't always see us coming. But as soon as I pushed through those glass doors, the atmosphere shifted like a cold front rolling in. The hum of polite chatter from the agents in their crisp suits and the well-heeled clients sipping coffee died down, replaced by these heavy, lingering stares that made my skin prickle, like I was some intruder crashing a private club. There was Brad, the lead agent behind the polished oak desk, a white guy in his 40s with that slicked-back hair and a tie that probably cost more than my weekly grocery run, who glanced up from his computer and did this double take, his eyebrows furrowing just enough to show he was already sizing me up and finding me lacking, muttering under his breath to a colleague something about "must be here for directions" with a smirk that dripped condescension, as if a black man in farm gear couldn't possibly be a serious buyer in their world of manicured estates. And the clients. Oh, they didn't hold back either. A couple in designer coats flipping through brochures whispered just loud enough for me to catch. "What's he doing here?" "Looks like he wandered in from the wrong side of the tracks." Their chuckles like little jabs, laced with that subtle racism that assumes folks like me, with my darker skin and immigrant last name that doesn't quite fit the Anglo mold around here, are better suited to laboring in the fields than owning them. I felt that isolation creep in right away, like a fog settling over the room, my chest tightening as I approached the display wall with those glossy property maps, running my fingers over the photo of that luxury farmhouse, imagining my kids running through those fields while I integrated my patented soil sensors, tech I'd invented, drawing from my abuela's tales of Andean farming wisdom, turning barren plots into bounties back home. But inside, man, it stung. I could see their motives plain as day. These people weren't just dismissive, they were protecting their bubble, that elite circle where success looks a certain way, white and wealthy, and anyone who doesn't fit gets pushed out with those calculated cold glances and whispers meant to make you question your place. What I never expected was how those small digs would build into something bigger, testing every ounce of composure I'd learned from my parents' stories of crossing borders with nothing but hope and a prayer, holding my head high even as the humiliation isolation wrapped around me like an unwelcome hug, hinting at the hidden fire I'd been stoking for years, the success nobody in that room could guess, born from nights tinkering in our garage with circuits and code, turning my family's immigrant struggles into a multi-million-dollar breakthrough that was about to flip their world upside down. You know how you can feel a room turn against you, like the air itself gets heavy with judgment? That's exactly what hit me harder as I stood there in that fancy real estate office, surrounded by glossy brochures and those smug faces, trying to keep my focus on the dream that brought me here. A 200-acre farmhouse with smart irrigation that could take my family's agribusiness to the next level, blending the old-school Colombian farming wisdom my abuela passed down with the tech I'd spent years perfecting. I was flipping through a property listing, my fingers tracing the map of that perfect spread, picturing my kids, Sophia and Mateo, laughing in the fields while my drones buzzed overhead, monitoring soil health like I'd learned from tinkering in our garage back when we barely had 2 nickels to rub together. Man, they weren't whispers anymore. They were getting bold, slicing through the air like little knives, each one meant to make me feel smaller. Brad, that slick agent with the overpriced tie, leaned back in his chair, his smirk growing as he called out to a colleague loud enough for everyone to hear. Hey, maybe he's here to check out the cheap lots out back, you know? Something more. His speed. The way he said it, dragging out his speed with that condescending drawl, hit like a punch, and the room erupted in soft chuckles, like they were all in on some private joke. A woman in a pearl necklace flipping through a catalog nearby didn't even look up but muttered, "Probably thinks he can farm his way into this place." Her voice dripping with that kind of casual racism that stings worse because it's so smug. Like she assumed my dark skin and immigrant last name meant I was only good for manual labor, not owning land. I felt my chest tighten, my hands gripping the edge of the brochure a little too hard, the paper crinkling under my fingers as I swallowed the urge to snap back. Because I knew, man, I knew that's what they wanted, to see me lose it, to prove their stereotype that I was out of place. Just some hot-headed outsider who didn't belong in their polished world of million-dollar deals. But inside, I was burning, not just with anger but with this deep, aching frustration, thinking about my parents who left Medellin with nothing but a suitcase and a dream, working double shifts in meatpacking plants so I could go to college and build something bigger. I took a deep breath, letting their stories ground me, remembering how my papa used to say, "Mijo, no dejes que nadie te apague la chispa. Don't let anyone snuff out your spark." So I kept my eyes on the listing, asking Brad a pointed question about the property's water rights, throwing in some technical jargon about aquifer sustainability that I knew from my ag tech patents, just to see if he'd trip up. His eyes flickered with surprise, but he recovered quick, brushing me off with, "Look, buddy, that's not something you'd need to worry about. Maybe stick to something simpler, like a small plot for—" What corn? The room laughed again, louder this time, and another client, a guy in a golf polo, chimed in, "Yeah, back to the fields, right? That's more your thing." The words stung, not just because they were cruel, but because they echoed the same garbage my parents heard when they first got to this country, the kind of talk that assumes folks like us, Black and Latino, can't dream bigger than manual labor. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to crack, to storm out or lash out, but I just stood there, my jaw tight, forcing myself to stay calm, channeling every ounce of that Colombian grit my abuela taught me when she'd tell me stories of outsmarting landlords back in Bogota with nothing but her wits. I wasn't just fighting for me. I was fighting for her, for my parents, for my kids who'd one day inherit this dream. What I didn't expect was how those jabs would keep escalating, each one pushing me closer to a breaking point, testing whether I could hold on to that spark without letting it explode into a fire I couldn't control, all while something bigger was brewing inside me, a quiet plan to turn their mockery into regret they'd never see coming. You know that moment when you feel a whole room turn on you? Their stares like a spotlight you didn't ask for, trying to shrink you down to nothing? That's where I was, Darius Johnson, standing in that polished Iowa real estate office, my boots leaving faint dirt marks on their gleaming floor, my heart pounding with a mix of hurt and defiance as the snide comments from Brad and the clients grew louder, bolder, like they'd decided I was fair game. The whispers from before had turned into outright jabs, no longer softened by fake courtesy, and the air felt thick, like I was wading through a fog of contempt. Brad, that smug agent, leaned forward, his arms crossed, his voice carrying across the room. "Look, friend, you're in over your head here. This isn't some open house for just anyone. Maybe try something more affordable." The way he said affordable hit like a jab, implying I couldn't possibly belong in their world of high-end farmhouses. His smirk screaming he'd already written me off as some small-time nobody. The room broke into laughter, not quiet anymore but sharp, stinging snickers that echoed off the glass walls. A woman in a tailored blazer standing by a model of a luxury estate didn't bother keeping her voice down as she said to her husband, "He's probably just here to look around, thinking he can play big shot. He'd be better off sticking to rentals." Her husband nodded, chuckling, adding, "Yeah, this place is for serious buyers, not folks browsing for fun." Each word piled on like bricks, my breath catching as I fought to keep my face steady, my eyes glued to that listing photo of the farmhouse, my dream, the one I'd built from years of late nights in our garage, coding soil sensors while my kids slept, turning my parents' immigrant hustle into a business that fed thousands. I could hear my abuela's voice in my head, her thick Colombian accent whispering, "Mijo, la dignidad no se negocia." Dignity isn't up for sale. But man, it hurt. Not just their words, but how they stripped me down in front of everyone, painting me as an outsider who didn't belong. My hands gripped the brochure so tight the edges crumpled, and I felt this deep, aching isolation, like I was standing alone while they watched, waiting for me to fold. Another client, a guy with slicked back hair and a fancy watch, piped up, "Betty's just here to gawk. Maybe take a picture to show his friends he stopped by a place like this." The room laughed again, and I caught Brad's eye, his smirk screaming he thought he had me pegged, some guy who'd slink away, embarrassed. But inside, I was wrestling with this fire, this mix of pain and resolve, thinking of my parents who'd faced worse when they landed in this country, dismissed at every turn, yet still built a life for us. I wanted to tell them about the millions my age-tech patents had earned, how I'd turned their affordable dreams into a thriving empire, but I held back, knowing an outburst would just play into their hands. Instead, I straightened up, my voice calm but sharp as I asked Brad, "Can you explain the zoning permits for this property? I'm planning to expand precision agriculture." The question was deliberate, packed with enough tech know-how to make him pause, his smirk faltering for a second as he mumbled, Zoning's not something you'd need to worry about. Try something easier." But I saw it, a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a tiny crack in their confidence. What I didn't expect was how their jabs would keep coming, each one testing how much I could take, pushing me closer to the edge of that quiet strength I'd been clinging to, while a spark inside me burned hotter, whispering that this wasn't the end, just the start of a moment that'd make them regret ever doubting me. Man, you ever feel like you're drowning in a sea of sneers, holding on to your pride like it's the last piece of driftwood keeping you afloat? That's where I was, Darius Johnson, standing in that Iowa real estate office, the sting of their insults, back to the fields, stick to picking fruit, still burning in my ears, my hands gripping that crumpled property brochure like it was my lifeline to the dream I'd been chasing since I was a kid, listening to my abuela's stories of Colombian resilience over steaming cups of tinto. The air in that glossy showroom felt like it was closing in, every laugh and whispered jab from Brad and those clients piling on like stones, trying to crush the fire I'd kept burning through years of grinding out my age tech business, turning my parents' immigrant hustle into something real. My heart was pounding, not just from anger but from this deep, aching loneliness, like I was the only one in the room who believed I belonged. But then, like a breeze cutting through a storm, I heard a familiar voice call out, "Darius? Yo, is that really you?" And everything shifted in a heartbeat. I turned, and there was Jamal Carter, my old college buddy from Iowa State, striding through the glass doors in a sharp gray suit, his polished loafers clicking on the floor, his broad smile cutting through the tension like a ray of sun. Jamal, a black man like me, but with that polished edge of someone who'd made it big in corporate agribusiness, his family hailing from Jamaica, always carrying this easy confidence that made rooms listen. His presence was like a lifeline, and for the first time that day I felt a crack in the isolation, a warmth spreading in my chest as he pulled me into a quick, tight hug, his laugh warm and real, saying, "Man, it's been too long. What you doing in this fancy joint?" The room went quiet for a second, like they were sizing him up too, but Jamal didn't flinch. He just stood there, his hand on my shoulder, his eyes sparkling with the kind of respect I hadn't felt since I walked in. I hesitated, feeling the weight of all those stares, the contrast between my muddy boots and his tailored suit making me feel small for a split second, like maybe I really didn't fit here. But I pushed that down, my voice low but steady as I said, "I'm here to buy a farmhouse, Jamal. That big one with the 200 acres. Been working toward it for years." His eyebrows shot up, not in doubt but in excitement, and he grinned. "For real? You're making moves, man. That's the Darius I know." His words were like a spark, reigniting that fire inside me, reminding me of late-night study sessions back in college when we'd talk about breaking barriers. Him with his corporate dreams, me with my tech ideas rooted in the soil my parents worked. But the room wasn't done with us. Brad, leaning against the desk, crossed his arms, his smirk back as he muttered to a colleague, loud enough for us to hear, "Great, now we got two of them acting like they own the place." A couple of clients snickered, one whispering, "Guess they think they're a power duo now," their voices dripping with that same prejudice, lumping us together as outsiders who didn't belong in their elite world. I felt that familiar sting again, but Jamal caught my eye, his gaze steady, and he leaned in close, his voice low and firm. "Darius, don't let these fools get to you. You're bigger than this room, man. You always were." His words hit deep, like a memory of my mama telling me, "No dejes que te hagan pequeño, mijo. Don't let them make you small." I nodded, my shoulders straightening, the weight of their judgment feeling a little lighter with Jamal by my side, his belief in me like a shield against their venom. But I could see Brad's eyes narrowing, his smirk twitching like he was itching to escalate, and the other clients' whispers were growing bolder, their stares sharper, like they were waiting for us to crumble. What I didn't expect was how Jamal's presence would stir something bigger in that room, drawing their fire onto both of us now, testing whether we'd bend or stand taller. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of a fight that was about to turn their world upside down. You ever stand at a crossroads where you know you've got to decide? Let the world keep pushing you down or push back with everything you've got? That's where I found myself, Darius Johnson, in that suffocating Iowa real estate office. the air thick with the echo of their laughter and those cutting insults. Stick to something your level. Just dreaming big, still ringing in my ears like a bad song on repeat. My hands were steady on that crumpled brochure, my eyes locked on the farmhouse listing that held my dream of building a legacy for my kids. But inside, my heart was hammering, a mix of hurt and fire that felt like it could burn the whole place down if I let it. Jamal, my college buddy, was still by my side, his hand on my shoulder like an anchor, his calm confidence reminding me I wasn't alone. But the room's hostility wasn't letting up. Then it happened. A voice boomed across the showroom, sharp and deliberate, like it was meant to shatter what little peace I'd been holding on to. It was Mr. Harlan, a big-shot client in a tailored gray suit, his silver hair gleaming under the lights, standing up from a leather chair with a look of pure disdain. "Hey, buddy," he said, loud enough to make every head turn. "You're holding up the real business here. Why don't you do us all a favor and leave? This isn't your scene." The words landed like a punch to the gut, and the room went dead quiet, all eyes on me, waiting for me to crack. A woman near the reception desk smirked, covering her mouth like she was watching a show, and Brad, that smug agent, leaned back with a grin, egging Harlan on with a nod. I felt the isolation clamp down harder, like I was back to being that kid in our immigrant neighborhood, hearing folks whisper about my parents not belonging, but this time it was worse, public, raw, and meant to humiliate. Jamal tensed beside me, his jaw tight, ready to jump in, but I raised a hand to stop him, my voice low in my head screaming, "Mijo, no te dejes. Don't let them break you," like my papa used to say when he'd come home exhausted from jobs that treated him like less. I took a deep breath, my chest rising, and turned to face Harlan, my eyes meeting his without a flinch. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "And I'm here to buy that farmhouse. You got a problem with that? Say it plain." The room froze, Harlan's smirk faltering for a split second, like he hadn't expected me to talk back. He laughed, but it was forced, his eyes narrowing as he stepped closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, you're serious? Look at yourself, man. This place is for people who can actually make things happen, not folks playing pretend." A few clients nodded, their approving glances fueling his arrogance, and Brad chimed in, "Yeah, let's not waste time here. You're out of your depth." I could feel the fire in me flaring hotter, not just anger but this deep, unyielding resolve, thinking of my abuela's stories of standing up to landlords in Bogota with nothing but her wits, or my nights coding in the garage while my wife, Elena, kept the kids quiet so I could focus. I wanted to lay it all bare, my millions in patents, my ag-tech empire. But I held back, knowing the real win wasn't in shouting my worth but showing it. So I leaned in, my voice steady. "You don't know me, Harlan, or what I'm capable of, but you're about to find out." The words hung in the air, a challenge that silenced the laughter for a moment, and I saw a flicker of unease in Harlan's eyes, like he sensed something bigger coming. Jamal gave me a nod, his smile subtle but proud, like he knew I was holding my ground in a way that'd echo beyond this room. But the truth was, I could feel the weight of their stares pushing harder, testing every bit of that Colombian grit I'd inherited, and what I didn't expect was how this moment was just the spark for a bigger explosion, one that'd make them all choke on their doubts when my truth came to light. You know that moment when you've taken all you can, when the weight of every sneer, every jab, every smug glance feels like it's about to break you, but instead, something inside you snaps into place like a switch flipping, and you decide it's time to show the world who you really are. That's where I was, Darius Johnson, standing in that Iowa real estate office, the air still thick with the echo of Mr. Harlan's booming challenge to leave and Brad's snide dismissal about sticking to something easier, their laughter and the client's smirks burning in my ears like a fire I couldn't put out. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing, not just with the hurt that had been piling up since I walked through those glass doors, but with this fierce, unyielding resolve that had been building my whole life, through my parents' immigrant struggles, through nights coding in our garage while my kids slept, through every door slammed in my face because I didn't look like their version of success. Jamal was still beside me, his steady presence like a brother's, his eyes flashing with pride, but I knew this was my moment, not his, to turn their game upside down. Harlan, that silver-haired big shot, stood there with his arms crossed, his smirk daring me to respond, and the room was watching, waiting for me to crumble or slink away like they expected. But I was done swallowing their poison. I took a deep breath, my abuela's voice echoing in my head. Mijo, tu valor no lo define nadie más. Your worth is yours alone to define. I reached into the pocket of my faded flannel, my fingers brushing the worn leather of my wallet, and pulled out a folded bank statement, the kind that carries numbers most folks in this room would never dream a guy like me could touch. I held it up, slow and deliberate, letting the paper catch the light, the bold print of my multi-million-dollar balance from my Ag Tech patents staring back at them. This, I said, my voice calm but cutting like a blade, is what I'm working with. Enough to buy that farmhouse outright, and then some. The room went dead silent, like someone hit mute on the world. The laughter choked off. Harlan's smirk froze, Brad's jaw dropped, and the client's eyes widened like they'd just seen a ghost. I stepped forward, holding the statement out toward Harlan, who flinched like I'd thrown a punch, and I said, "You thought you had me figured out, didn't you? Thought I was just some dreamer out of his depth. But I built an empire from the ground up, and I don't need your approval, or your farmhouse." The words landed like a thunderclap, and I saw panic ripple through their faces. Brad gripping the desk, his knuckles white, the woman in the blazer clutching her catalog like a shield, Harlan swallowing hard, his arrogance melting into something like fear. I turned to the room, my gaze sweeping over every one of those judgmental stares, and said, "I came here to buy a dream, but I'm not spending a dime in a place that treats people like this. You don't get my money, and you don't get to define me." The silence was heavy, their smug confidence shattered, and Jamal gave me a nod, his smile wide and proud, like he knew this was the Darius who'd always been there, waiting to step into the light. I folded the statement, tucked it back in my pocket, and started for the door, my boots echoing on their fancy floor, each step a declaration that I was done with their game. But what I didn't expect was the fire still burning inside me, not just for me, but for every person who'd ever been looked down on like this, whispering that this wasn't the end. It was the start of a reckoning that'd make them face their own shame head-on. Man, you know that feeling when you've just dropped a bombshell and the room's still reeling, but you're already thinking about what's next, about how to turn pain into something bigger. That's where I was, Darius Johnson, striding out of that Iowa real estate office with Jamal at my side, my heart still pounding from the moment I flashed that bank statement and watched Harlan, Brad, and those snickering clients choke on their own smugness. The air outside hit my face like a cool wave, crisp with that fall Iowa scent of harvest and possibility. But inside, I was a storm, part triumph, part raw hurt from their words, and a whole lot of fire to make sure this wasn't just a moment but a movement. My boots crunched on the gravel as I headed to my pickup, the Colombian flag sticker on the bumper glinting under the parking lot lights, a quiet reminder of my parents' journey from Medellin to this very fight. I could still feel the weight of their stares through the glass doors behind me, their silence louder than their laughter had been, but I wasn't done. not by a long shot. Jamal clapped a hand on my shoulder, his voice steady but proud. Darius, you just flipped their whole world, man. They didn't see that coming. I managed a half smile, but my chest was tight, thinking about how close I'd come to letting their venom make me doubt myself. Yeah, I said, my voice low, but it shouldn't take a bank statement to get respect. Jamal nodded, his eyes serious, like he knew this wasn't just about me. It was about every black and Latino kid like us who'd been sized up and dismissed. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hesitating for a second, then dialed my daughter, Lena, my rock, a civil rights lawyer who'd been fighting battles like this since she was old enough to argue. Dad? Her voice came through, sharp with concern, like she could hear the weight in my silence. You okay? I took a breath. The memory of my abuela's words. Mijo, la justicia no espera. Justice doesn't wait, pushing me forward. Lena, I need you, I said, my voice steady now. What happened in that office? It's bigger than me. They need to answer for it. Less than an hour later, Lena pulled up in her sleek sedan, her charcoal suit crisp, her eyes blazing with that same fire I'd seen when she'd take on bullies as a kid. She strode toward me, her heels clicking with purpose, and hugged me tight, whispering, I've got you, Dad. Then she turned to the office, her gaze cutting through the glass like she could see every one of those cowards inside. She marched in, me and Jamal trailing behind, and the room froze again. Brad behind the desk, Harlan lingering by a display, their faces paling as Lena's voice rang out, calm but razor sharp. I want to speak to whoever's in charge right now, she said, her lawyer's tone leaving no room for games. What happened to my father in here wasn't just rude, it was discriminatory, and I'm not letting it slide. Brad stammered, his earlier swagger gone. It was just a misunderstanding, ma'am. Lena didn't blink. A misunderstanding? You mocked a man for how he looked, assumed he didn't belong because he doesn't fit your mold. That's not a misunderstanding, that's prejudice, and I'm here to make sure you answer for it. Apologize now. The room was dead quiet, the clients avoiding her gaze, Harlan mumbling something incoherent, his arrogance crumbling. Brad managed a weak, I'm sorry if we offended you, sir. But his eyes darted away, no heart in it. Lena shook her head, her voice cold. That's not good enough. You'll hear from my office. This is going legal. I stood there watching my daughter take charge, my heart swelling with pride, but also this ache, knowing this fight was just starting, that it wasn't just about me, but about every person who'd ever been made to feel small. Jamal leaned in, whispering, She's a force, man. They don't know what hit 'em. I nodded, feeling that fire in me shift from anger to purpose, my resolve hardening like the soil my family had turned into gold. What I didn't expect was how Lena's presence would light a spark in that room, forcing them to face their shame, and how it'd set the stage for a battle that'd make sure no one else had to endure what I did, not on my watch. You ever feel that moment when you're not just fighting for yourself anymore, but for something bigger, something that could change the game for everyone who's ever been kicked down? That's where I was, Darius Johnson, a few weeks after walking out of that Iowa real estate office with my head high, the sting of their insult still lingering like a bruise, but my heart fueled by a fire that wouldn't quit, not after what they did, not after seeing Lena, my daughter, step up like a warrior, ready to take this fight to the next level. The crisp fall air had turned colder, the Iowa fields outside my family's farmhouse now bare after the harvest. But inside me, things were heating up. Lena had taken charge, filing a lawsuit against that fancy real estate firm for discrimination, and I was right there with her, reliving every cutting word. Out of your league, stick to rentals, to make sure they paid for what they did, not just to me but to anyone who'd ever been judged for their skin, their clothes, their roots. I sat in Lena's small office in our town's immigrant neighborhood, the walls lined with legal books and a framed photo of my parents from their first day in America, their smiles full of hope despite the odds. Lena was at her desk, her laptop open, papers stacked high, her eyes sharp as she sorted through evidence like a general planning a battle. "Dad," she said, looking up, her voice steady but warm, "we've got something solid here. I found a witness, a clerk from the office, Maria, who saw it all go down." My chest tightened, not just from the memory of that day, but from the thought of someone else seeing the truth, someone who didn't laugh along. Maria, a young Latina woman who'd been behind the counter that day, had reached out to Lena, her voice shaking as she shared how she'd secretly recorded part of the incident on her phone, unable to stomach Brad's smugness or Harlan's loud taunts. "I've seen it happen before," Maria had told Lena, her words heavy with guilt, "to other folks who don't look like their typical clients. I couldn't stay quiet this time." That recording, man, it was gold, capturing Brad's snide, affordable jab and the client's laughter, every word proof of the prejudice they tried to dress up as a misunderstanding. I listened to it with Lena, my fists clenching as those voices echoed again. But this time, it wasn't just pain. It was power, knowing we had them cornered. Lena also tracked down another witness, a delivery guy who'd been in the office dropping off packages, who'd overheard Harlan's leave demand and seen the way the room turned on me. "It wasn't right," he'd told her, his voice firm. "I could tell you were serious, but they treated you like you were nothing." Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in the wall we were building, and I could see Lena's pride in her eyes, not just for the case, but for what it meant for us, her fighting for her dad, for our family's Colombian roots, for every immigrant of color who'd been dismissed. But reliving that day wasn't easy. Every time I recounted the story for Lena's legal notes, I felt the weight of those stares again, the isolation, like I was back in that showroom, my boots out of place on their polished floor. Yet, something else was growing too, a spark of hope, fueled by memories of my abuela teaching me to plant yuca with care, saying, "Mijo, lo que siembras con amor siempre crece." What you plant with love always grows. I'd planted years of hard work, from coding in our garage to patenting tech that turned farms into powerhouses, and now I was planting justice, not just for me but for my community. Word was spreading in our neighborhood, folks stopping by with plates of empanadas and words of support saying, "Darius, you're fighting for all of us." That backing, from people who'd faced their own share of doors slammed shut, made the fight feel bigger, like we were rewriting what it meant to belong. Lena looked at me across her desk, her smile fierce. "Dad, this case isn't just about that office. It's about showing the world we don't back down." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride, but also this quiet resolve, knowing we were building something that outlasts us. What I didn't expect was how the community's support would light a fire under us, turning this lawsuit into a beacon for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong, pushing us closer to a day in court that'd make them all face the truth. You ever sit in a room where the truth hangs in the air like a storm about to break, and you know it's going to hit hard, changing everything? That's where I was, Darius Johnson, standing tall in a packed Iowa courtroom, the wooden benches filled with reporters, neighbors from our immigrant community, and even a few curious onlookers drawn by the buzz of this case that had set our small town ablaze. The sting of that day in the real estate office, Brad's smug, affordable jab, Harlan's loud leave, the client's laughter, still lingered like a scar. But now, with Lena by my side, her legal binders stacked high and her eyes blazing with purpose, I felt a shift, like the fire in me wasn't just anger anymore, but a beacon for justice. The courtroom was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, expectant as the judge, an older woman with a stern face and sharp eyes, settled at the bench, her gavel resting like a promise of what was coming. Lena stood up, her charcoal suit crisp, her voice steady as she began. "Your Honor, we're here to address a wrong that goes beyond one man. It's about a system that lets prejudice thrive unchecked in places meant to serve everyone." My heart swelled, pride mixing with the ache of reliving that day as Lena called Maria, the clerk who'd recorded the incident, to the stand. Maria's hands trembled as she took the oath, but her voice was firm. "I saw how they treated Mr. Johnson, mocking him, assuming he couldn't afford to be there because of how he looked. It wasn't just wrong, it was cruel." Lena played the recording, and man, hearing those voices again, Brad's snide tone, Harlan's taunt, the client's snickers, felt like a knife twisting, but it also lit something in me, a resolve to see this through. The courtroom fell silent, the audio echoing like a confession, every word exposing their bias, leaving Brad, seated with the company's lawyers, pale and fidgeting, his earlier arrogance gone. Harlan, in the back, shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the floor. The delivery guy, our second witness, took the stand next, his voice steady. "I heard them tell him to leave, saw how they ganged up on him. He was just trying to do business, but they treated him like he didn't belong." Lena's questions were sharp, cutting through the defense's weak claim of a misunderstanding. Their lawyer, a slick guy in a pinstripe suit, stood, his voice tight. "Your Honor, these were isolated remarks, not reflective of our client's policies." Lena didn't flinch. "Isolated? Your Honor, this wasn't one comment. It was a room full of people, staff and clients, enabled by a culture that tolerates discrimination. My father was targeted for his appearance, his background, and we have the evidence to prove it." The judge's eyes narrowed, her pen tapping as she listened, and I could see the weight of her judgment settling over the room. I sat there, my hands folded, feeling the stares of our neighbors behind me, their support like a warm current, reminding me of my abuela's words. "Mijo, la verdad siempre encuentra su camino." The truth always finds its way. Lena closed her argument, her voice rising. "This isn't just about my father, Darius Johnson, a man who built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. It's about every person who walks into a place like that and gets judged before they can speak. We demand accountability, not just words, but change." The defense scrambled, offering promises of future training, but the judge cut them off, her voice like steel. "The evidence is clear. Mr. Johnson was subjected to blatant discrimination, and this court will not dismiss it as a misunderstanding. This company failed to uphold basic fairness." She paused, her gaze locking on the defense. "We'll proceed to determine remedies, but I'm warning you, justice will be served." Brad's face was ashen. Harlan's head hung low, and I saw regret flicker in their eyes, not just for the lawsuit, but for the shame of being exposed. Lena turned to me, her smile subtle but fierce, whispering, "We're almost there, Dad." My heart was full, pride for her, for us, for our community, but also this quiet certainty that this fight was far from over, that what we'd started here would ripple beyond this courtroom. What I didn't expect was how their regret would fuel my resolve even more, pushing me to make sure this victory wasn't just mine, but a lesson for everyone who'd ever been made to feel less. You ever reach a moment where the weight of everything you fought through lifts, and you realize you're not just standing for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong? That's where I was, Darius Johnson, stepping out of my new luxury farmhouse under the wide Iowa sky, the golden light of a late fall afternoon glinting off the sleek barns and fields that stretched out like a promise kept. The memory of that real estate office, Brad's smug jabs, Harlan's loud leave, The client's cruel laughter felt like a distant storm now, faded by the victory we'd carved out in that courtroom just weeks ago. The judge's gavel had fallen like a hammer, ordering the company to pay a hefty $500,000 fine, mandating anti-discrimination training, and forcing a public apology that ran in the local papers and across their website. Each word a reminder that prejudice has a price. I'd taken that money and bought this dream property from a rival firm, one that greeted me with respect, their agent shaking my hand like I was family, no side eyes or whispers, just a deal done right. Now, standing on this land, my boots clean but still carrying the spirit of the soil my parents worked in Colombia, I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible, like the world had finally caught up to who I'd always been. My wife, Elena, stepped out onto the porch, her eyes sparkling as she took my hand, whispering, "You did it, mi amor. You showed them all." My kids, Sofia and Mateo, ran across the field, their laughter echoing as they chased each other, free in a way I'd only dreamed of when I was their age, listening to my abuela's stories of planting yucca under Andean stars. That evening, we gathered around the dining table in our new home, the warm glow of the lights casting shadows that felt like family. My parents' framed photo from their first day in America sitting on the mantel, a quiet nod to the journey that brought us here. Over plates of arepa and fresh lemonade we talked, not just about the win but about what it meant. "I used to think," I said, my voice soft but steady, "that if I worked hard enough, folks would see past the color of my skin or where I came from. But what I learned is that sometimes you've got to fight to make them see. Not for them, but for you, for us." Lena, sitting across from me, nodded, her lawyer's fire still burning in her eyes as she added, "Justice isn't just handed out, Dad. We fought for it, and we won't stop. This is for every kid in our neighborhood who's told they can't dream big." The room felt alive with that truth, with the weight of our Colombian roots and the Black and Latino pride that carried us through. Out there, Brad had lost his job. Harlan and the other clients carried the shame of their exposed prejudice, and the real estate firm was scrambling to rebuild its reputation under court oversight, their lesson etched in every new training session they were forced to hold. But for us, it wasn't about their regret. It was about what we'd built. Word of our fight had spread, and neighbors kept stopping by, bringing empanadas, sharing stories of their own battles, saying, "Darius, you gave us hope." That night, as I looked out over the fields, my drones humming softly in the distance, monitoring the soil I'd turned into a legacy, I thought of my abuela's words, "Mijo, lo que siembras con amor siempre crece." What you plant with love always grows. This land, this fight, this family, it was all proof of that. I wasn't just a black immigrant farmer anymore. I was a symbol of what happens when you don't let anyone define your worth. What I never expected was how this victory would ripple, inspiring kids like Sofia and Mateo to dream without limits, showing our community that justice isn't just a word, it's a fire you carry, a legacy you leave, a truth that soars like the open sky above our new home. In the quiet depths of life's trials, the story of Darius Johnson reminds us that true worth isn't defined by the fleeting judgments of others, but by the unyielding strength we cultivate within ourselves. Facing prejudice in a place meant for opportunity, Darius teaches us to stand firm against injustice, not with anger, but with dignified resolve, swallowing the bitter pill of humiliation while holding fast to our dreams. It's a gentle nudge to recognize the toxic shadows of bias that linger in everyday spaces, urging us to break the silence and seek justice, not for revenge, but for healing and growth. In a world quick to label based on appearances or origins, This tale broadens our gaze to embrace diversity as a tapestry of shared human struggles, encouraging self-reflection. Have we ever turned a blind eye, or worse, contributed to another's isolation? By discovering our own self-worth through resilience, we learn that dignity blooms from the seeds of perseverance, turning adversity into a legacy of empowerment. For those of us who've walked similar paths in maturity, it's a call to foster understanding, knowing that every voice raised against prejudice paves the way for a more compassionate tomorrow. What do you think about this lesson? Does it resonate with your own experiences? Share your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button if it moved you, and subscribe so you won't miss more stories that inspire hope amid life's storms. May you find peace in your own journeys, emerging stronger with every dawn.